Het-Heru, Namaste, Haru Nefer. This is Kasank Ma'a with another broadcast for you. And today I want to talk to you about how our world creates criminals. Now this is a very interesting subject matter because we don't understand the power that we have. A lot of times I talk to you about the story of Asar and Set and how Asar, or Osir or Osiris, is buried deep within you waiting to be resurrected by Oset or Isis. And that analogy is pretty accurate because you have two hemispheres to your brain. You have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Right hemisphere is the seat of the subconscious mind. And the left hemisphere is the waking state, the conscious mind. And they're bridged and they work in tandem. However, you can be polarized more in one than the other. And in our world, we're polarized in left brain thinking, which is segregative thinking, as opposed to right brain thinking, which is synthesis. The problem that we're finding out is that we have been retarded in our progress. We think we know, but we don't know. And knowing is the realm of Tahuti. And learning from higher institutions or universities is the realm of Sebek. Most of you are aware of the fact that I don't like universities. I think the teachings, the methods that they use are just designed to make you stupid or put you into a stupor state. But here's what we have to start looking at. When we watch the news media, we see a proliferation of negative news about how you have whatever is the trending criminal or the one that they anoint to be the criminal of the day or the week or the month, whether it be ISIS, Saddam Hussein, Muslims, blacks, Jews, whatever, who's the criminal. And it's all about proving that this country is right and that we're out there spreading democracy, we're trying to stop evil, when the opposite is true. But not only that, as a divine being, you know that you are consciousness, right? And there is not an individualization of consciousness. There's only one consciousness, the collective consciousness or the super consciousness that we're all connected to, which we see as individualized because we're in a vehicle called Geb. And because this vehicle exists in the fourth dimensional realm or the subjective realm, we have the illusion of separation and individualization due to the left brain. Now, there's nothing wrong with the left brain. It does its work properly. But when you polarize yourself in that type of thinking, Hegelian dialectic, then everything you see is skewed and you don't get a holistic view of life and a proper perspective on life. And hence you start to use communication that betrays the true essence of who you are. When you start classifying people as your enemy, or you start classifying people as opposed to you, you create a reality where there's an adversary. Now, I've talked about this a lot of times where whatever your beliefs are start within and resonate outward and creates a fourth dimensional experience for you to interact with. Because Neter, God's source, has placed its consciousness within you, the vehicle, the Geb, to have an experience. Because in the beginning there was just one, and that was God's source. God divided itself into two so they can interact with itself to gain the experience. But don't confuse it and think that there are actually 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7 billion people on this planet. There are not. There's just one consciousness on this planet, individualized for an experience to learn. Because what you're doing is you're learning from the experience, communicating to your immediate oversoul. All right? So you have two perspectives on things. You have a limited perspective within space and time, which means that there's a beginning, middle, and an end. Then you have another perspective, which is the whole perspective, which is not defined by linear space-time. In fact, in that realm where you can see all of your lives at once and your experiences at once and those of other people at once, and you can see all possibilities exist within one. Let me explain it better. If you can collapse space and time into one point, which we would call a singularity, all that would exist is the one consciousness. Do you understand? So with that, we understand our true nature. Who we are is consciousness. It's not white, black. It's not gay, straight. It's not all of these things. It's just one consciousness. Now, that one consciousness has many different layers that it's working through, which I've already stated. The oversoul, which your immediate oversoul can see all your lifetimes. Above that, there is another level of the oversoul where it's experiencing everything, and it's not confined to any one point in space and time. It has the property of non-locality. It doesn't exist in any one point in space and time. Therefore, it is everywhere. We have seen when people would take certain drugs like ayahuasca and DMT, the one thing that they reported coming back was they felt a sense of oneness with all. This is your true nature. So if you are one with all, you cannot oppose yourself. You cannot have an enemy. Then you begin to realize that the challenges that you face and the things that you're going through are there to come into the realization of your divinity, of who you truly are. It's like going and working out and lifting heavier and heavier weights. You're building your muscles up. So yourself cannot oppose itself. So when you're communicating and using language like that person is my enemy, they get on my nerve, I hate them, then you're betraying your true self. Now the media uses this propaganda to not only create conflict in the world, but to hide your true essence of who you truly are. Because when you start thinking of an adversary, you create one. Because the universe will mirror back to you your thoughts and feelings based on your emotions. It's going to create an enemy for you. It is the law, it is the rule. You are the co-creator in this experience. So you have to be very careful of the thoughts that you harbor. But our society with the ruling elite know this, that you are a reality generating machine. So what they do is they pump out through news media things such as you're only human. You have no control over the world. All that you see is reality. It's basically an objective reality, which is not true. It is subjective. The only thing that really exists the only thing that's really real is the experience. But you exist, not the people that you see around you. They are merely representations or avatars created for you to interact with, to gain the experience and communicate to your oversoul. So I want this to be clearly understood that when you think of something, let's say for example, I like women with natural, frizzy, crazy hair, which is true. What I will see in my reality is an abundance of that because I have an emotional attachment to that. I'm going to see a lot of women with that if I am very observant. If I think that people are mean-spirited, the people in my reality will be mean-spirited. That's how it works because I am God-man and I am creating my reality to experience. So we have to understand that very clearly, that in this realm, in this particular level of our reality, if you want to call it that, which is really Maya, there are different levels to it. Put it to you this way, I'm going to use this for lack of a better word. I'm going to say this reality has multi-levels to this reality. I can experience in this reality a good reality or a bad reality. Depending on the thoughts that I'm having, I'm influencing this reality. Now, I could change this reality and go to one where, let's say, for example, I'm rich. That would take a lot of energy and power. But for now, I'm existing in this reality for a reason, based on my belief system, but there are many different things that can happen within this reality depending on how strong my emotional attachment is to that. Speaking of that, the ruling elite, the cabal or the Illuminati, whatever term you want to use to classify the 1% that's controlling the planet, knows that they can keep you here confined within this one reality through karma. What do I mean by that? You have come back to this reality for a reason, most likely because of the pre-life agreement or because you have unfinished business, but more so that you have an attachment to physical things, the physicality of things. So the ruling elite know this, so they create an emotional roller coaster for you. They cement the idea that this reality is real, so that your soul keeps coming back, it keeps reincarnating, and that it can never ascend to a higher level, because when you start to stop placing labels and definitions on things, because life is meaningless, that means that these things that you see, the tree, the chair, the van, the buildings, have no meaning to them. They're illusionary. But you're placing meaning on them because of your perspective. And when you do that, you are creating an attachment to that. And then now you have an emotional response to that definition. And the ruling elite know this, which is why they use these terms: adversary, democracy, good, bad. And hence, it creates the karma of where your soul keeps recycling and keeps coming back and keep coming back, and it serves their needs because they're energy vampires and they're sucking that energy out of you or from us in this matrix. We have to learn to look and not be judgmental, to not place names and definition. Tahuti tells us nothing has a quality in and of itself. One man's tea is another man's poison. I may like something and you may not like it, which tells us that there is no inherent quality within that thing itself. So stop labeling it and defining it. Someone may oppose me, but they are not my enemy because I cannot oppose myself. They're merely there to show me how to tap into my spiritual power to overcome that. They're merely there to show me that through my thoughts, beliefs, I can transcend this reality and shift to a new parallel reality where I have a more prosperous life. Does that make sense to you? And when I don't have that attachment, and I don't have those names and definitions and labels, when I transcend and go to the next realm, or I ascend to the fifth dimension, I have the opportunity not to be reincarnated or to recycled. I can go to a higher level and become a sage and guide people, or an honored ancestor as Shepsu, and guide people from the ethereal realm. Do you follow me here? So it's very important in this lifetime that you understand that the idea of an enemy and creating this grand battle, and that there are people that oppose you and you're fighting them, is only a trick that the ruling elite uses, and the means and the tools that they use are things like the Bible, the Quran, and you read those fictional books, and they teach you about good and evil. Well, when you transcend to the fifth dimensional or higher planes, there's no such thing as good and evil, all right? Ma'at is about balance, is putting things back into balance and not punishing. So those terms are merely there to have you see someone as outside of yourself, as a separation, as not one with you, to make you see things as not part of a whole, but a separation or individualized components. Remember, the true essence of who you are is consciousness. You only have an individualized experience for the sake of gaining the experience and learning to communicate to your oversoul. But it's an illusion, it's not real. It can change depending upon your belief system. So stop with the idea that we have enemies. The system that's constructed creates this idea of a criminal element. For example, people addicted to drugs are victims. You have CIA, you have all these other organizations paid off by the government to ship drugs into the communities, get people addicted to drugs, then arrest them, create something called the prison industrial complex or mass incarceration. Meanwhile, they label and define something else as an opiate epidemic, and those people need help, and we're not going to imprison them. Well, it's the same thing. It's just tricking you with different labels and definitions. So when you see people such as foreigners who are creating what we call terrorist acts, not realizing that our government goes overseas and takes out democratically elected leaders by labeling them and calling them the enemies of democracy, like Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein. We have no right to intervene in sovereign nations. But when they start to put up this ideology of spreading democracy and spreading peace, then you set the stage for something called slavery, invasion, colonization. But because they're using different naming conventions and definitions, you are okay with it. You're all right with it. When you really have to stand up and say, these people are not my enemy. I don't have any enemies. I am consciousness. They're one with me. They are me. And therefore, I don't agree with your definition of labeling them and saying things like terrorist or villain or evil, and then labeling us, who have become the aggressors in this country, as we're the good people, we're doing right. No, we're not. We're not. And it's all done under this religious guise of, well, my religion is better, I'm following the true way of God, and God sanctioned that I strike down my enemies. There you go, that's the problem there. And when we subscribe to those definitions, and religion, because it's so very, it's so emotionally based, it creates that type of reality. And this is why when people pass on to the afterlife, they encounter what they think is Jesus or Moses or Muhammad, because they're gonna see what they create, because they're God men and God women, and they don't realize that, and they become castrated, meaning their power has been taken away from them because they subscribe to a false definition of who they are. And that's what this world and this media propaganda is so clever and masters of, is to redefine who you are and have you subscribe and react to that definition of just human. I can't control anything. The outside world is beyond my control. It's separate from me. There's no separation. There is no outside world. It's all you. I have said enough. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and contribute to the Patreon campaign, where I give you a lot more information, and with that comes some meditations, mantras, spells, whatever you want to call it. But it's really awesome stuff that will get you going and take you to the next level. So until my next broadcast, this is Kasak Ma Keperu. Amen Ra.